Rakt på med K-G Bergström special. Kvällens gäster Tommie Smith och John Carlos. Atleterna som knöt nävarna för de svartas rättigheter.
Hej och välkomna ni som tittar, and welcome Tommie Smith and John Carlos to Sweden and to our show. You made history 40 years ago through your controversial and unique demonstration on the podium. Did you ever regret that during these 40 years?
Looking at that, I don't see any reason for me to regret. Even the thought of it kind of nauseates me, because that to think of a regret would be telling your mother and your father that you were raised wrong and your ideals growing up as a child was in opposition to a reality. So I never have regret.
What about you, John?
None whatsoever.
Okay, before we continue the interview, we'll give a short description of what really happened in Mexico City.
De gjorde det otillåtna. De blandade ihop idrott och politik. Det ledde till att de dödshotades och stängdes av från de olympiska spelen. Allt för att de höjde sina knutna nävar i protest mot rasismen och segregationen av de svarta. 1968. USA kokade av rasmotsättningar. Martin Luther King hade mördats på våren. Medborgarrättsrörelsen växte sig allt starkare och fler talade om Black Power. Det året var det också dags för de olympiska sommarspelen i Mexico City. Till tävlingarna kom 2 unga svarta män, John Carlos och Tommie Smith. Löpare i världsklass och starkt knutna till Black Power-rörelsen. Och det gick bra för dem båda, mycket bra. Tommie Smith tog guld och John Carlos brons på 200 meter. Och det var när medaljerna skulle delas ut senare samma dag som det hände.
Höjer de nävarna och tittar ner när den amerikanska nationalsången spelar. Detta är den mest dramatiska prisutdelningsceremoni jag någonsin har bevittnat.
De svarta handskarna, de nerböjda huvudena och det faktum att de bar svarta strumpor utan skor var ett sätt att visa sympati med Black Power-rörelsen. Konsekvenserna för de båda blev stora. Deras tysta manifestation gjorde att de omedelbart skickades hem från OS. De blev hatade och bespottade när de kom tillbaka till USA. Men de blev också hjältar och är förebilder för människor som än idag tvingas kämpa mot rasism och diskriminering.
Why did you do it, Tommie?
Because it was a necessity. It was a growing experience. It was an educational probability. The many things that I had learned from a childhood all the way up to college, there were some things I could not put into words growing up as a child, but I knew that there was a need to change whatever I saw later in life. And in retrospect, as I review it, what was needed is for me to do a personal gesture of the ideology of what my country offered me, which wasn't total. So that was my platform.
John, was there discrimination against blacks even in sports at that time?
Yes, very much so. Let me give you for instance. You know, as a young man, when I got involved in track and field representing the United States, and they would give us our packages and so forth, you know, our care packages, they didn't have anything in the care package to represent black people in terms of like hair products. They would give me suntan lotion, the hush puppy shoes. The things of my culture, they had no significant value to the people of power, the people that organize these things. Many of the various athletes before me, Jackie Robinson and so forth, had gone through these oppressions for so long. But the young individuals that came along 25, 30 years later, they were going through it just as much. We felt that the powers to be should be a little more sensitive to the needs of all the athletes, not just one sector.
Tommie, you said at that time that if I win, I'm an American, not a black American. But if I did something bad, then they would say I'm a Negro. Was it that
Well,
bad?
you know, all the restraints of the apologies, all the need to be called good things really never happened. And what is very necessary, not only then but even now, is a recognition from the human aspect with civil intent. And Mexico City, for me, was very civil also. Laws that had already been put on the books, but the lawmakers were not the ones that were to continue that facet of equality or equity because the laws on the books. So actually they broke their own rules. And the intensity of Mexico City brought this out. This is why they said that we should keep our dirty laundry home and do our cleaning there.
How carefully planned was the demonstration?
Well, the Olympic Project for Human Rights, which John Carlos and Tommie Smith was a part of, in fact, we were a big part of it, that was the umbrella of the whole movement of the black athlete. The victory stand was an appendage of that, which was a individual capitulation of what we thought. It was individual because John and Tommie have our own thoughts. We have our own needs to believe in the relevancy of equity. But just so happened, we at times have words to explain how we feel, and there's sometimes the need to continue explaining is very necessary. But the point is, at the end of the day, our thoughts are basically the same. We have other means of getting there, like Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
I understand that you were the initiator and asked John quite just before the ceremony, but you didn't hesitate?
Well, I think that both of us initiated together. There's been a lot of talk going back and forth. He did, I did, but we all got together and initiated together. I think that the biggest factor was probably God, the fact that God was involved in it on a personal basis.
And your protest contained several symbolic elements, like?
Well, if you've noticed, most of the black athletes wore black socks to represent poverty, which John and I also talked about before. The gloves represented power. Now, there are those who view it as power. I view it as empowerment, which has the restitution of power because of blackness, because of black America. And so the representations were very authentic, and they were thought about before things started happening like they did as we walked out to approach the podium.
How was the immediate reaction at the stadium, John?
Well, I think it was cheerful. It was really divided. You know, we had a tremendous amount of people that understood the necessity for a statement such as that, particularly in a country as Mexico. There was very many people that was painfully pushed back in society. So a lot of those people understood, the common workers that worked in the stadium, they applauded.
But part of them booed, didn't they?
Oh, we had quite a bit of people that booed, and a lot of them were, basically Americans and Europeans that pretty much felt that we were out of place in doing what we did.
How did you feel when you heard the boos?
Well, I expected boos. I expected the boos. Boos come about when people have seen something for the first time and they don't understand and they express their disdain for the fact that, hey, this is unheard of. Someone would dare to do something to upset the apple cart relative to the Olympic movement.
Then you were suspended and asked to leave the Olympic Village. There have been different versions of what really happened to your medals. Were you deprived of them, or do you have them still, Tom?
Yeah, that was something that was the next morning, I think, maybe that night, the Olympic Committee asked us to come to where they were staying. Now, John Carlos and Tommie Smith had our medals. And for this individual, I don't think it was necessary for even them to make such a sarcastic offer for us to come so they could talk to me about taking my medal away. I had won it fair and square, dealt with it without breaking a rule, and there was no reason for them to take my medal away.
And you still have it?
Yes, I do.
So do you.
Well, it was propaganda put out for 40 years that they had taken the medal. But as Mr. Smith explained, how do you take something from someone that you didn't give? Yeah, I earned it. It's as though you work for your job, and I tell you at the end of the week, I'm taking your paycheck. How am I going to take your paycheck if you earn that check?
What happened when you returned to the U.S.? What was the reaction?
Well, the reaction was mixed. Many people of color admired us and respected us to the utmost. They had very few individuals on the other side of town that had that same admiration and respect. But for the large nucleus in the government, we were villains and we were vilified. based on our actions in Mexico City.
You got even death threats, didn't you?
We received death threats before we went to Mexico City because of our tolerance and our faith in the Olympic Project for Human Rights. 2 young black athletes fighting for their lives, a cry for freedom long before the victory stand. So we received death threats even before then.
And even afterwards?
Afterwards, I received some death threats, but after the victory stand, they were so dissatisfied with what happened. I think they, regardless of how they felt, they did not want to even at that time participate in any kind of verbal lingos.
Did you get any kind of protection from the white community? Bodyguards or something like that?
Well, I laugh because it's funny. I'll leave that.
Of course not. Many